Hello everyone, welcome to next session of our SAP basis training. In this particular session we are going to discuss about SAP ABAP processes. We have seen this topic already in detail with our other free course which is available from SAP Buddy, that is SAP NetWeaver Fundamentals. However, as part of SAP basis we will just revise what we have seen. So we will make it more simpler than the previous sessions. As I said, the NetWeaver fundamental course is a prerequisite for this course. So I highly recommend that you should complete the NetWeaver fundamentals as much as possible and understand as much as possible. Understand this is more of theory. However, this is very important as a basis consultant to know how an SAP system works. Now let us see the process, how it works when a SAP user executes something in the SAP system. You can see the three-tier architecture of SAP R3. We have our presentation layer, application layer, and the database layer. The presentation layer, for example, like SAP GUI or the web GUI, a user log into the system. As we seen, when you user log into the system, it will go to the message server, then come to ABAP dispatcher. ABAP dispatcher is the place where it will take all the requests, ABAP related request, then put it on first in first out basis, then it will assign the specific work process which is requested for the specific task. Then we have buffer. The buffer is a place where you have the temporary data which is available in your SAP system. So the buffer is an area in your main memory of your SAP system. So let's take a typical example. When a user logs into your SAP system, for example, using SAP GUI, then that request is directly sent to SAP ABAP dispatcher in the application layer, that is in your SAP application system, application instant. So ABAP dispatcher will take all the requests, then in first in burst out basis, it will assign the specific work process. The requested process could be a dialog work process or it could be an NQ, which is required based on some processes or based on some execution which was done by the dialog or the background work process. Or it could be an update work process or background work process, or it could be a spool work process which is related to printers. Do you want to print something? Now you may think there is only two dialog work process in this particular server. How is it going to work? If let's say in this particular system you have 10 user who logged into the system, so how it's going to handle it? It may not be possible all the 10 users are triggering some task at the same time. Let's assume 5 users are triggering some task. Let's say some dialog task. Then this will be requested to the ABAP dispatcher. The dispatcher will take 5 requests. Then it will allocate the first dialog work process to the first request. Then the second dialog process to the second request. Once the specific task is completed, then it's going to assign the second request. So in this scenario, if you see, if let's say you have more than 2 dialog work process, the same user may be requesting for the dialog work process second time. So that second request may not be executed the same dialog work process. It may be executed in a different work process, whichever it is available. So that is the beauty of SAP, how it balances the entire load. The buffer is area in the memory where the highly used data are saved. So in case, let's say SAP needs some data, for example, your dialog work process needs some data, first it is going to look into the buffer, whether these specific data are available in the buffer. If it is available, then it can fetch it from the buffer quite easily and it will be faster. Let's assume if it is not available, then the request will be sent to database. This database could be any databases which is supported by SAP, and it will fetch the specific data. This is how the three-tier architecture will work in terms of ABAP request. Next, let us have a look into how the process flow for an SAP ABAP request. Let's assume the user is using a SAP GUI. So using SAP GUI, they will log into the SAP system and execute or will request some information or execute some task. So that request go to ABAP dispatcher. Then you can see the requests are queued in the ABAP dispatcher queue. So depending on the work process available, either for example here we have a number of work process, one work process is assigned. Then inside the work process you have the task handler, screen processor, and ABAP interpreters. So here the task is being executed. So when the task is executed, let's assume that the task requires some data. So in that case, it will check the shared memory, whether this particular information which is required for the specific task is available here or not. Otherwise, then it will go to the database. Here it's mentioned as ABAP. It's a database where it will pull out this information from database and roll in to the memory and process the specific data, and it will give the output to the user. Next, let us see database interface of an ABAP system. Here you can see the application server, that is our SAP system, and the database. In general, in the SAP system, all the program executed in SAP system is written in ABAP. So these ABAP codes are an open SQL statements where you have a database interface. It's a DB interface which is available in your application server. Will convert these statements, ABAP statements, into native SQL statement, and it will convert as per the database. Then it will retrieve the information or update the information. Similarly, the data also been fetched or written in the database. However, you can also see the native SQL statement directly written into database. This does not happen all the time, but in SAP, it is possible that you can execute native SQL statement depending on the database which you are using. However, in a better scenario of an SAP system, this is not recommended. The reason why this is not recommended is because let's assume you are writing a native SQL statement, and after some time you are upgrading your database whether the particular native SQL statement may not be supported. In that case, you need to identify these programs and need to change it. However, you are not complying with all the security requirements which is required for your SAP system. So it is always better that you use ABAP code, do not write any native SQL statement. Let's say if you are changing the database, also will be a problem. Then you will ask why then we have the option to have native SQL statements. There may be some scenarios where the ABAP coding may not be enough. You may need to interact with your databases, some exceptional cases. Then native SQL statement also can be used. However, as I said, for security reason, it is not advised to use native SQL statement. This is the way the database interface will work in your SAP ABAP system. Next, let us see the work process multiplexing. This also we have seen in our previous course. Here you can see the process in and process out for a specific dialog work process. It explains, let's say, one specific dialog work process or one specific task, not necessarily to be executed from one dialog work process. For example, this is an out, then you went to the screen and did something, the user gave some input, then when the input came, then it is processed by a different work process. Yeah, like this, It can be executed by the same work process, or it could be executed by different work process depending on the work process which is available or which is free at the specific time. With this, we are coming to end of this particular session. Thank you very much for listening. I will see you in the next session. Bye bye.